Even in the medieval period, there was a conflict within what you might call Bushido, the warrior mentality. Because if you emphasized self-sacrifice for your lord, and that the honorable thing for a samurai to do was to die for his lord, it also affected how you might be available to live and serve another lord. And as you know, from the 15th, 16th century, that was changing. So, if it was the emperor that told him not to die, it could have been the shogun. Right? The shoguns were very strongly opposed to the idea of everybody dying for their own feudal lord, because it meant their samurai were being taken away from them by that. So there's a conflict of loyalties involved. And that persisted into the later period. I can't go into the whole story for you, but if you want more information on that point, we can give it to you. There is a history of it. And it survives right up into the decision for Japan to go to war, because the civil ministers around the emperor had great doubts about the wisdom of going to war. And the emperor himself did, as his father, the Emperor Meiji, had opposition to going to war with China. And Donald has written about this in his book on Emperor Meiji, so you can follow that up if you want it. But the Army and Navy ministers at the Privy Council meeting that decided this to go to war just said, we shouldn't be worried about what's right or wrong. We just go ahead and die. And we shouldn't be worried about the consequences. Dying is a glorious thing in itself, no matter what the outcome of the war is. So you know that that mentality had a fatal influence on that decision. Nobody wanted to stand up against that. That was the supreme value, the ultimate value. It was really pathetic, but it's obviously not confined to the Japanese.
It's interesting that fundamentalism has a connection with history, though. It seems to necessitate some sort of historical connection. When we talk about the modern jihadist, he is referencing a historical text and an old philosophy, or what he believes to be an old philosophy. When we talk about the Japanese in World War II, they're going back to sources like Hagakure, death is the only sincerity. That seems to be like a necessary aspect of fundamentalism. And I wonder if you guys have any opinion of what that connection is. Why is it there? And why is it important for fundamentalism to connect itself to an older history?
I should write down that one. Well, fundamentalism takes many different forms, not just one. And the cult of death is only one of them. Right? That is, you somehow prove your commitment to the supreme value, however that is defined. Self-sacrifice is one of the impulses that's common to human beings, right? And if it takes extreme forms, there are different reasons, particular to particular cases, why somebody might feel impelled to do this. But, as I say, fundamentalism doesn't have to take that form. You know from various forms of fundamentalism in the West that they can take the form of a dedication to a particular text, like Bible. They're taking the Bible literally. Well, you must understand by this time that there are different ways of reading the Bible, and not everybody's going to draw out the same conclusion from it. So ultimately, it has to do with the particular influences on particular individuals that make them fundamentalists in one way rather than another, right? But not all of them are necessarily given to the idea that the Bible can be taken literally, because they realize, many people realize, that there are conflicting statements in the Bible. They have to be resolved if you're a thoughtful person, right? So I don't think I should say anything more than that, but it's a quick answer. Yeah.
I don't want to change the topic too much, but just to get on a lighter note maybe a little bit. I'm a physics major here at the college, but because of the global core requirement, I've taken 2 semesters of Buddhism and Buddhist ethics. And so you mentioned before, quote, that the core curriculum here is actually just Western civilization and how you approach that perspective. And you mentioned coming back to Columbia for your graduate studies. So I would just want to know a little bit more about how, because I know every day I go to class for Buddhism, actually, I see your picture up in Hamilton about how the East Asian was integrated into the core curriculum at Columbia. I'd be curious how that came about.
Well, I do know more about that than Donald, because he was away in England teaching in Cambridge when this thing got started. But when I returned to do my graduate study, Harry Carman, the dean, by that time the dean, persuaded me that I should concentrate on preparing to introduce, first of all, Asian humanities and then Asian civilizations. So we prepared translations for use in both of those courses, and that made them available to large numbers of students when they hadn't been before. So it was a major project of translation and writing texts. Ultimately, the committee that sponsored this produced well over 150 different books for use in such courses. But the initial readings were meant to be comparable to what you would read in CC or literature humanities. Okay.
How much do you
And Donald helped with some of the translations from the Japanese, as I did from the Chinese.
With the study of, for a Western perspective, studying of East Asian culture and civilization, how, they're like, at least I can see 2 immediate different kind of doing translation, focusing on translation, translating the texts as they were written for a Western audience versus kind of a Western critique or commentary on the text. How do those kind of play off against each other in Asian humanities?
I think originally we were very much afraid that students would think of it as belonging into another world, something that they couldn't approach. And we tried insofar as possible to write the introductions to the translations and so on, or choose which works to be translated, ones that were easier to understand, or at least would interest the people enough that they would want to understand these texts. It would have been possible if we had so desired to choose the most difficult texts, or the ones that were perhaps esteemed in their own country, but not immediately intelligible otherwise. But I think we wanted at that stage to approach, to have something that the students could come to and not feel there was incomprehensible beyond their ability to digest.
Well, I think that's true of the work that Donald did very early, especially with his anthology of Japanese literature. It's not quite so true with respect to the selections that we made for the Asian humanities and even for the Asian civilization courses. Basically, what we wanted to do was not to start from any Western premises or Western views or interpretations. Look at what these people themselves valued. Okay? what did they consider classic?